Hello everyone. Know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So, before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. Kyoto, once the capital of Japan, is home to 17 world cultural heritage sites and has long been a favorite destination for tourists, expats, and backpackers from all over the globe. Famous for its stunning ancient temples like the Golden King and the magical Kamisea, it is also world-renowned for its charming winding streets and serene gardens. As the heart of Japan, Kyoto is the last place anyone would expect a mass murder to occur. However, on a humid, overcast morning on the July 18, 2019, one man's quest for revenge over a perceived act of plagiarism would shock the world and take the lives of 36 people, causing serious injuries to a further 34, making it the deadliest attack on Japanese soil since the end of the Second World War, with the likes of Studio Ghibli, Spirited Away, and My Neighbor Totoro, as well as many other cult favorites such as Sailor Moon and Gundam. Anime is a $2 billion industry and has long been a key aspect of Japanese culture, enjoyed by children and adults alike from all over the world. Kyoto Animation, known as Kyoani, to its scores of loyal fans, started life as a small and humble animation studio first established in 1981 by charismatic husband and wife team Hideaki and Yoko Ono Hata. The Hatas began their studio by recruiting unemployed mothers and other inexperienced workers who would ordinarily not be given a chance. Yakahoda, talking to a journalist at the time, stated, "Women have an innate power of being kind and gentle, so we hire more female staff because we also want our animation to be filled with that heartwarming power." This kind of sentiment alone made Kyoani stand out from the crowd and immediately won the hearts of so many within the anime community. In the following years, the studio grew in size and gained widespread popularity across Japan for its production of high-quality anime movies and for its skills in storytelling, producing over 28 television shows and films between the years 2003 and 2019. Many of the studio's productions became instant classics, such as the series The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzuya, an animation series about the adventures of a supernatural high school girl; Clannad, a fantasy drama in Con, a series following the lives of for high school girls. The studio was a creative dream workplace as well, and positions there were highly sought after by other artists and writers alike, not only for the chance to work at a successful and popular studio, but also due to the fact that Hideaki and Yoko were very kind employers with a vision to support artists fully. They paid a generous full-time salary to staff, where other animation studios tended to only pay artists and writers on a freelance basis. They also offered an array of training opportunities within the studio, as both Yoko and Hideaki believed from the beginning in fostering artistic talent wherever they found it. One way in which the studio discovered new talent and up-and-coming artists was by running the annual Animation Awards competition, a yearly cash prize contest open to professional and amateur writers alike, and offering the chance for lucky winners to have their stories published and adopted by the studio, unbeknownst to Hideaki and Yakahara and others at Kyoani. It would be this same competition that would spark a hatred so deep in one man and flame his obsession with revenge, culminating in one appalling act of violence. The morning of Thursday, the 18th of July, started pretty typically for the employees of the Kyoani Studio 1 building. The day, though overcast, was already growing. Humid, and the cicadas could be heard, buzzing continuously in the trees jotted. Along the roads leading to the busy Rokua train station in the residential area of Fushimi where Studio One was located. From the outside, Studio One, the animation company's main base of operations, was just an ordinary-looking, old-fashioned and simple three-story building connected by a single iron spiral staircase. But the inside was very much different. The interior had a buzzing but very relaxed and creative atmosphere. Tatama mats were laid out on the floors, as is Japanese custom in the home. Employees walked around barefoot or in slippers. There was even a space in the corner of the second floor for taking a nap if artists wanted to catch up on sleep after lunch. The Hatters always wanted their company to have a family feeling to it, and Studio One was a testament to that. Around 70 artists, writers, and animators were gearing up for another hectic day of creating, whilst chatting and laughing about their plans for the weekend. Amongst them was 22-year-old Yuka Kuzuma and 23-year-old illustrator Yukioma, who had both only just recently joined the studio after graduating from university. Yuka's mother would later say about her daughter that her dream since she was a young child was to go into the animation industry. At around 10:30 a.m., a disheveled and heavy-set man wearing spectacles, a sweat-stained red t-shirt, and dirty stone-washed jeans burst through the front doors of the studio, carrying a 40L liquid container and shouting, "Die, die, die." The man then began frantically splashing gasoline around the entrance hallway and overshocked studio employees who attempted to stop him. A desperate struggle ensued, but the man pulled out a lighter and ignited the fuel, causing what many witnesses recalled as a large flash and explosion. A middle-aged man who was working at a housing exhibition near the studio at the time told reporters after, "I was in the office around 10:30 and suddenly I heard an explosion. When I went outside, I heard another large explosion. I could see there were flames and smoke mainly on the second and third floors of the studio, and some people were evacuating. The smoke was rising quickly and it was really thick, so I immediately called the fire department." Engulfed in flames, the culprit fled screaming from the building, where he was pursued by two studio employees, and with the aid of police officers later, he was wrestled to the ground in a courtyard around 100 meters away. As the badly burnt man struggled with police, he repetitively shouted, "They plagiarized my work. Did it because they stole my novel." And he demanded to speak to the president of the studio. Police restrained the man, who had severe burns on his legs, chest, and face until backup arrived. Officers also discovered knives and bladed weapons concealed in a bag near the studio that belonged to him, too. Due to the very common occurrence of earthquakes in Japan, the vast majority of smaller buildings, such as the three-story Kyoto Animation Studio 1 building, are constructed with wooden frames which can cause fires to spread with chilling ease. Heartbreakingly, this would also prove to be the case with Kiani, which, due to its designation as a small business building, also lacked sprinklers and fire extinguishers throughout its premises. The flames spread and grew ferociously within seconds, trapping most of the terrified employees, including Yuka and Yuki, inside the building and forcing them up the single spiral staircase to the smoke engulfed second and third floors, where many of them collapsed due to suffocation or succumbed to the flames and died. A deadly arson attack at an animation studio in Japan has proven devastating. At least 33 people are feared dead and dozens more were injured in the attack. rescue operations are still ongoing. A man was reportedly seen spraying gasoline around the building before it was quickly engulfed by flames. We found 2 people on the ground floor, 11 on the second floor, 22 on the staircase from the 3rd floor to the roof. This is so outrageous hearing. This was caused by arson regardless what the motivation could have been. I feel anger towards the suspect. The suspect was injured in the fire and is now in hospital. It's not clear what his motive was, but one witness overheard him complaining that the studio had stolen his work. He seemed to be in pain, irritated and suffering, but also angry, as if he was resentful. I heard him saying something like, "You copied it." Firefighters would later state that the fire had grown to the unbelievable temperature of 957 degrees Fahrenheit. Bystanders on the street outside could only watch helplessly in horror as screams and shouts drifted from the building, which was now submerged in smoke. The extreme heat and toxic fumes drove many of them back as they desperately awaited for the fire brigade to arrive on scene. 81-year-old Kino Camera, who lived close to the studio, told reporters the next day that he saw several women jump from the burning building's 2nd floor. They were so badly burned the blood was coming from their noses and all of their clothes, but their underwear were gone, he said. Another witness was 74-year-old Hatsumi Yamashita, who taught dance at the local community center where many of the injured were brought to receive immediate emergency treatment. The dance teacher told reporters she thought one of the girls was wearing a jet black outfit. However, when she looked closer, she realized to her horror that when the girl laid down on the floor, she was so burned that she was almost naked. Could never forget this young woman, Miss Yamashita said. On this tragic morning, the studio president Hideaki wasn't at Studio One. He had been preparing for an interview with a major Japanese television channel about some animation work that they had created for the 2020 Tokyo Summer Paralympics across the city at Studio 5. It was just as the interview was coming to a close at around 10:33 that he received a call from one of his employees informing him that there was a fire at Studio One. He later stated he wasn't overly concerned. At the time, the member of staff who had called him didn't seem alarmed, and Hideaki wrongly assumed one of the animators had set off a fire alarm or that there had been a small confined fire in the staff kitchen. He brushed off the call and continued his morning, as usual, making preparations for an early afternoon business meeting at Studio One, telling himself he would find out soon enough what had been the cause of the telephone call. It would only be a short while later, as he was driving toward Studio One, that he noticed the thick black smoke and heard the wailing sirens. He began to worry. He called his wife Yoko on her cell phone. He knew she wasn't scheduled to be at Studio One that day, but was relieved to know that she was safe, though she also didn't know what was happening. Unable to progress further in his car due to the firefighters blocking off the streets, the 69-year-old CEO parked quickly on a side street and ran towards the billowing clouds of smoke and the studio that he and his wife had dedicated their entire lives to building up. As soon as he got to the scene and saw the scale of the fire, he knew there was nothing he could do. He stumbled upon a small group of his employees sprawled out on the ground in an alley, coughing and crying, their clothes and skin black with smoke. He asked them what had happened, and when no one could really answer, he fell to his knees and embraced them. He would spend the rest of the day at the scene, unwilling to leave, trying to help and console his surviving employees in any way that he could, trying to understand what had happened. For the husband and wife team of Hideaki and Yakahata, life, and their beloved studio would never be the same again. The death toll from an arson attack at an animation studio in Japan has climbed to 33. As Asia, correspondent Renee Henry explains, it's the country's worst mass murder in almost 2 decades. Most bodies were found on the stairs to the top floor, employees seemingly collapsing as they tried to escape to the roof. Firefighters smashed windows to pull the injured to safety. The 41-year-old suspect also collapsed but found alive, not far from the Kyoto Animation Studio, accused of breaking into the building, dousing it in petrol and setting it alight while 70 people were inside. Neighbors hearing him scream, "Drop, dead, you copied it." The fire would rage for 5 hours until 30 fire engines and countless brave firefighters managed to get the blaze under control and then finally extinguish it at approximately 6:20 a.m. the following morning. The atrocity would instantly claim the lives of 34 people, 20 of them women and 14 of them men, with 2 more victims later dying in hospital from their injuries. Tragically, the firefighters would discover many of the dead on the spiral staircase leading up to the roof, their bodies so badly burned they could only be identified by DNA testing. In the coming days, all that would remain of Kyoto Animation Studio 1 building was a charred and destroyed shell, piles of flowers gathered at the site by the hour, and it would remain a shrine to the dead until it was formally demolished on the 28th of April 2020. The demolition activity at a Kyoto animation studio was finally completed. After months of major labor, people across Japan and the world were heartbroken and disgusted by this tech. Every person who heard the awful news had 2 simple questions. Who would do something like this and why? In 2019, 41-year-old Shinji Uba had been out of prison for 3 years after a 6-year sentence for robbing a convenience store with a kitchen knife in 2012 and was now living in a single occupancy apartment in a suburban area just outside of the north of Tokyo and over a 7-hour drive from Kyoto. Always a deeply troubled individual, Aoba had grown increasingly isolated and volatile since the death of his father from suicide in 2009. A disheveled and sweating man he recognized as the troubled Aoba was standing there when the neighbor asked what he wanted. Aoba attacked him, shouting, "I will kill you." The attack was completely unprovoked, and the shocked and frightened neighbor quickly locked himself in the apartment and later reported it to the police. It was just one of many such incidences reported to the local police in the months and weeks leading up to the massacre. A 37-year-old woman who lived across the street from Aoba's building later stated to journalists that she frequently saw the police and ambulance crews attending disturbances at his apartment, where loud music was often played through open windows to the annoyance of many. It seemed to everyone who had witnessed Aoba's behavior that he was very unstable and could be violently triggered by the smallest of things. It would only be a matter of time before something pushed him over the edge completely. Unbeknownst to everybody, Aoba's fuse had been lit the year previously. On November 18, 2018, Oba was sat in his apartment watching anime, which he now did with the majority of his time. He didn't have any friends or hobbies, and anime and video games had become his only remaining connections to society, people, and real life. On this day in particular, he was watching the 5th episode of the popular Kiani series named Suruin, an animation about a group of high school boys in the archery club trying to make it to the national tournament whilst also overcoming other life problems. This episode would infuriate Aoba sending him into a dark and bitter rage. In the episode of Suruin, there was a brief scene where the anime's protagonists buy meat that is discounted because it is past its sell-by date. Oba glared at the television, unable to believe what he was watching. He had written the same exact scene where a protagonist buys discounted meat that has passed its sell-by date, and he had written it in a novel he'd submitted to Keanu's annual animation awards competition in the years previously. The fact that the coincidental scene was a very minor and completely inconsequential one was utterly lost on Oba. He became fixated on the idea that Keanu had rejected his submission, and then they had stolen his idea, plagiarizing his work and ripping off his novel. Oba became obsessed. It was in this same period of time that the studio received a deluge of anonymous death threats by email that numbered in the hundreds, and the police had been called in to patrol the main studios for a brief time. The emails could never be tracked down by the authorities due to the author using a particular software that blocked all tracing attempts. The police patrols gradually decreased as the death threats ceased. It would only be after the massacre and apprehension of the killer that the death threats and Aoba would be linked, though not ever concretely proven. 4 days before the Studio One massacre, a 27-year-old company employee who later gave his name to the media simply as Matsumoto was lying on the sofa in his apartment watching a sports live stream on YouTube when the person in the apartment above his started banging on the floor, assuming the upstairs neighbor was assembling furniture or rearranging their apartment. Matsumoto simply turned up the volume on his sports game and tried to ignore the noise. However, it was only moments later that the neighbor in the apartment next to his started violently thumping on the wall. This caused a chill to run down his spine as the now seemingly attacking the shared wall was the neighbor from hell, Shinji Aoba. Matsumoto had been living next door to Aoba for a couple of years and was scared of him, stating he always was noisy, dirty, and rude, as well as being known for violence. He said he smelled terrible, really bad. I'm sure restaurants wouldn't let him in because of the way he smelled. When Aoba started beating on his front door, Matsumoto attempted to ignore it, but when Aoba returned to his apartment and started throwing objects against the wall, Matsumoto decided to try and talk to him. He went outside into the corridor and knocked on Aoba's front door. When there was no answer, he shouted through the letterbox that it wasn't him making all the loud noises, but an upstairs neighbor. The door suddenly opened and out came Aoba, grabbing the younger, smaller man by the throat and hair, shouting, "You're too loud. Shut up. I'm going to kill you." When Matsumoto again tried to explain to the enraged Aoba that the noises hadn't come from his apartment but the one upstairs, Aoba screamed in his face, "It's irrelevant. You're annoying. I'll kill you. I have nothing to lose." Shaken, Matsumoto fled the building to the nearest police station to report the incident. But when police finally arrived at Aoba's apartment to talk to him, he had seemingly gone missing. Matsumoto would later go on to state that Aoba's eyes had looked insane that night. The following day, Aoba was witnessed riding the high-speed bullet train from Saitama to Kyoto, where he checked into a cheap motel in a downtown area situated close to many popular tourist destinations and night spots. In the days leading up to the mass murder, still wearing the same bright red t-shirt and stonewashed jeans he had been wearing the night of the confrontation with his neighbor Matsumoto, Aoba was witnessed by locals and captured on CCTV numerous times in the proximity of the Studio One building. On Wednesday, the day before the attack, Aoba strolled into a hardware store and purchased a four-wheel push trolley. That afternoon, he pushed the trolley over 6 miles to a gas station where he filled up 2 red plastic containers with over 10 gallons of gasoline. He then loaded the containers onto the trolley, paid for the gas, and wheeled the trolley towards a disused and abandoned child's play area situated underneath the motorway underpass. Was here in this lonely and deserted area that he concealed the gas containers that he would use in the appalling attack the very next day. Day that would change the lives of everyone involved and change Japan forever. Confusion was rife in the hours and days following the attack. Friends and family tried desperately to reach loved ones who worked in the Studio One building. Authorities published lists of survivors and staff members who had been taken to nearby hospitals, and many family members were left bereft when they couldn't find the names of their loved ones on the hospital admissions or on the lists released to the media. 69-year-old Kazu Okada, whose granddaughter Mumi Ono worked in Studio One and who hadn't been accounted for, told television reporters on the day of the fire that Mumi was my pride. Her name started appearing on the screens of anime movies. I was so happy to see that. I was proud of her. I want to see her face soon. It wouldn't be until over a week later that 21-year-old Mumi's fate would be conclusively determined through DNA analysis. Tragically, she had been another victim 1 week after the tragic arson fire at Kyoto Animation. Police have identified all 34 of the people killed. 15 of the 34 injured are still hospitalized. As Japan mourned, new laws were passed making it more difficult to purchase large amounts of gasoline in plastic containers, and buyers now have to give their full details and an explanation for the purchase, which is all kept on record. Kind fans and supporters from across Japan and the rest of the globe came together, making charitable donations to a GoFundMe for the studio, raising over $2.3 million for the victims and their families. A large majority of survivors returned to work as soon as they were able to, going back to the jobs they loved, continuing to create the animation that brought so much joy to so many people, and honoring the memories of their friends and coworkers who had passed away. Upon hearing that the motive for the mass murder was revenge over a perceived act of plagiarism, the Hatters and staff members went back over past competition entries and did in fact find a submission from Alba, but it in no way resembled the scene that sent him over the edge and had no similarities whatsoever to any scenes from any of the other studio's many works. Following the attack, he was taken by police guard to the intensive care unit at the hospital. He continuously admitted to setting the blaze as an act of revenge, telling the detectives, "I targeted the number 1 studio where the largest number of people were working because I wanted to hurt many people. I lit the fire because Connie stole my novel." He also told police and hospital staff that he expected to get the death penalty. Suffering from severe burns to most of his body, he soon lost the ability to speak and could only breathe with the aid of a respirator. He also received multiple skin grafts, and police waited until he was healthy enough to be arrested and charged. That day finally came on the 27th of May 2020. Almost a year after the attack, Alba was still recovering in a Kyoto hospital from experimental artificial skin grafts, but he was judged fit enough to be finally arrested on suspicion of murder and arson, being with the latest on the arson attack in Japan, where police have now officially arrested the man suspected of killing 34 people in a famous animation studio in Kyoto. They say the 41-year-old was also once convicted of stealing from a shop. Japan's public broadcaster says he went to the animation studio on Thursday, poured fuel and shouted "Die" as he set the building on fire. The attack was Japan's worst mass killing in 18 years. About 70 people were working in that studio when the fire broke out. He was officially indicted on the 16th of December 2020. It is highly likely he will spend the rest of his life in prison and escape the death penalty. Teruaki Yuzuru lost his wife Tawaki Shoko, who is an animation director working for the company. So many mothers, daughters, fathers, and sons were stolen in the cruelest of ways from their loved ones on that awful summer day in July 2019. However, their creativity, love, hope, and talent will never be forgotten and will live on in their animation work forever. Story 2. September 4th, 2011. Police in Fame, Oxfordshire in England, received a call from a concerned member of the public asking them to go to Iran court. Please, my neighbor. This man is beating the crap out of this woman and they've got kids. Sorry, I'm shaking because my next door neighbors getting beaten up bad, the caller said. When the emergency services arrived on scene, what they found was nothing short of a nightmare. Michaela Hall was born on the 7th of February 1983 to her mother, Julie. Michaela was an only child and she and her mother were inseparable. Julie worked hard as a single mother to give Michaela the best start in life, and they spent all their time together. Michaela grew into a happy and confident young woman with a close group of friends with whom she enjoyed going out. Michaela would go on to marry a local Oxford man, but it would later fall apart and the pair would split. This was an extraordinarily difficult time for Michaela, trying to adjust to the end of their relationship. One of Michaela and Julie's favorite things to do would be to go on holiday to Turkey. During one of these trips, Julie met a man called Med Sahim. Mehmet said he knew instantly that she was the one for him. After falling in love, the pair were wed in 2002 and Mehmet moved to the UK to live in Oxford with his wife and stepdaughter. In 2007, Michaela went to Turkey again. It was here that she met a waiter who worked at the resort, a man called Nsargo. They soon began a relationship and she quickly fell for him, returning to Turkey not long after to see him again. After coming back to the UK a couple of weeks later, Michaela found out she was pregnant. She was determined to make the relationship a success and couldn't wait to meet her baby. The pair had a long-distance relationship and she would travel to Turkey every few months to see Ensar. In 2008, they welcomed their first child, a daughter. Just a few weeks after the birth, she discovered she was pregnant again, and the couple had a baby boy the following year. Being a mother was everything to Michaela. Her friend described her son and daughter as being her right and left arm. Julie also adored her grandchildren and absolutely doted on them. After the births of their children, the true nature of Ensar's personality would start to come through. He exhibited extremely controlling and possessive behaviors. When she was in Turkey, he would tell her where she could and couldn't go and what she could and couldn't do. Even when she went back to the UK, he would continue to control her despite him being in Turkey. Michaela wanted her children to have their father in their lives, and she wanted him to come to the UK so they could be together and try and make their relationship work. Being a working mother with 2 young children meant life was busy and money was tight for Michaela, but determined to make it work, she would spend a lot of money flying out to Turkey to see Ensar, sometimes taking the children with her, and other times leaving them in the care of her mother. As Ensar did not like to share attention with the children, he would take advantage of how giving she was, and her finances would take a massive hit because of this. She would buy him gifts in the UK and send them out to him. According to those that knew the couple while he was still out in Turkey, his relationship with Michaela didn't matter to him, and he continued to have sexual relations with other women. The abuse in the relationship would start to escalate when Michaela went out to Turkey with the children to see him. Julie had also gone, and she remained at the hotel to look after her grandchildren. Michaela and Ansar had returned in the early morning hours, and an argument broke out in the kitchen. He began to raise his voice. Michaela told him to be quiet because the children were asleep and she did not want them to be woken up. Ansar then raised his fist and went to strike Michaela. Julie stepped in between them and tried to stop him, but he shoved her out of the way and then struck Michaela. Julie told friends that when she looked in his eyes, she thought he wanted to kill her. After having a bad feeling about him for so long, this incident only made Julie's hatred for him grow. Michaela continued to hold on to the hope that once he left Turkey and moved to the UK to settle with her and the children, that their relationship would start to get better, but more problems would arise. Ansar had absconded from Turkey's national service, and he was not allowed to move to the UK until he had completed this, and his visa was put on hold. Michaela spent significant amounts of money trying to go through various channels to help him. He finally agreed to take part in his national service after it became clear that this was his only option and the only way he was going to get his visa. But this led to further problems. He blamed Michaela for having to do his national service, even though it was completely out of her control. In December 2010, as he was doing his national service without warning and with no reason given, he ended his relationship with her. Michaela was devastated. She began talking to an ex from Turkey and decided to go out there to see him, but later said she had made a mistake in seeing the ex, adding that she should have been trying to patch things up with Ansar and make their relationship work. She returned to the UK and in a panic had her friends help her erase and remove any trace of her being in contact with her ex, knowing that if Ansar found out, he would likely explode. A few days later, Michaela received a call. It was Ansar acting like nothing had happened. They agreed to give their relationship another go, but her friends urged her to reconsider and not get back together with him, but she decided she was going to give it another go. In March 2011, she traveled to Turkey and the pair got married. Julie refused to go. Michaela had also not told her friends that they were getting married, with some finding out via Facebook when Julie posted a congratulatory message to the couple. Michaela flew back to Britain and began working to get her new husband a visa. However, he soon found out that she had previously gone back to Turkey to see her ex, and this enraged him. He would become even more verbally abusive when they spoke. This would often reduce her to tears, and her friends would also hear the verbal abuse, telling her that this was not normal behavior and he shouldn't be treating her that way. He continued to spam her phone with calls even throughout the night, calling 26 times. On one occasion in August 2011, leaving her feeling incredibly depressed, with a friend saying she was even contemplating suicide. Her friend told her she needed to turn her phone off. The following day, Michaela heard that his visa had been approved and was on his way to be delivered to him. The day after, Ansar boarded a flight to the UK and left Turkey. He lived with Michaela and their children at Julia Med's house in Fame, Oxfordshire. The tensions would soon start to come to the surface. Julie's hatred of Ansar was reciprocated, with him loathing how close she was to her daughter, other people in Michaela's life would see his deeply controlling and abusive nature, with him telling one of her friends that Michaela would always be his hatred for Julie and living in her house, coupled with his desire for revenge after finding out Michaela had met with an ex after he had ended their relationship without warning, began to boil away inside him. In a conversation with Med, Ensar said he felt like killing Michaela, but Med believed he was just saying things in anger, not actually meaning it. One morning, Michaela called one of her friends. She was extremely fearful and frightened, as Ensar had told her that if she returned home, he would cut her head off. Just 2 weeks after he arrived in England, a plane ticket was bought for him to go back to Turkey permanently. Michaela was devastated and begged him again for a final chance to make it work. As he was on his way to the airport, he decided to abandon the flight and returned to the family home. On September 2nd, he slept with a woman from a local bar, again showing no interest in his wife or his marriage. The following day, September 3rd, Ensar slept with the woman again and also consumed a significant amount of alcohol, as well as missing his shift at the local restaurant. He then went to the takeaway that Mehmed worked at 1:15 a.m. on the morning of September 4th and asked him if something were to happen to Michaela and Julie, what would happen to the children. Mehmed believed this was nothing more than the alcohol talking. 2:10 a.m. and Sargoyle returned to Erin Court. Julie and a friend, Casey, were watching television in the living room while Michaela slept upstairs with their daughter in the room and their son in the room next door. Ensar headed into the kitchen and took a knife from one of the drawers before going upstairs. As he went into the bedroom where his wife and daughter slept, it was here that he launched a terrifying attack, stabbing Michaela repeatedly. Julie and Casey ran upstairs to see what the commotion was. When Julie got to the bedroom, she found Ensar straddling Michaela as he stabbed her in the neck. As she tried to pull him off of her, she slipped and fell onto the floor. Ensar then turned his attention to her, repeatedly stabbing her as he had done to Michaela. Casey was also stabbed 4 times with one of the knife wounds missing her pulmonary vein by a matter of millimeters. Casey was able to escape the house and run, but Julie wasn't. As she tried to get to the door, she collapsed at the bottom of the stairs, the catastrophic blood loss making her unable to carry on. Nar then took their 3-year-old daughter and headed off into the night. After hearing the screams, a worried neighbor immediately called the police, and before long, emergency services were on scene. Casey was taken to John Radcliffe Hospital, where she would eventually make a recovery. Julie was found in a fetal position just inches away from the door. Michaela was found in the bedroom. The hunt was now on to find Ensar. He was seen on CCTV walking down a street, holding his infant daughter in his arms. He was still carrying the knife he had used in the murders, and his clothes had blood spatter on them. He walked to the pizza place where Mehmet worked and shouted, "No one believed me, but I've done it. I've butchered them both." He then put his daughter down on the ground and told me to take care of her. Med did everything he could to comfort the shaking and traumatized little girl, whilst also calling 999. As he walked around, Ensar called his family in Turkey. A man was seen on CCTV footage walking up to him to ask him for a cigarette lighter, but he immediately walked away after seeing Ensar holding the knife. The CCTV also captured the moment Ensar was taken into custody by 2 police officers. He told the officers, "Yes, I killed them, but you don't know why." Senior investigating officer, Detective Chief Inspector Joe Kidman, would later praise the police officers who had arrested him as they were unarmed, saying they showed great bravery and composure. As he was being questioned, he complained about the blood on his clothes and showed little to no care about what he had just done. Just 3 hours before committing the murders, he sent a message to his cousin on Facebook saying, "Have a look. The English papers will talk of me tomorrow. The crazy Turk wolf who covered London in blood. The knife is ready. You know I'm handy with a knife. Good with knives." Postmortems were carried out on Julie and Michaela, and it was determined that most of the stab wounds had been to the chest and neck, leading to extensive blood loss. Julie was stabbed more than 50 times, and Michaela suffered more than 40 stab wounds. This had all happened in front of their 3-year-old daughter, with their 2-year-old son in the next room. And Saral was charged with the murder of his wife and mother-in-law and the attempted murder of Casey. He was scheduled to appear at Oxford Magistrates Court that Tuesday, and he entered a plea of not guilty to all charges. May 2012, it was now time for Nargle to stand trial. His behavior was shocking. He was photographed going into court grinning for the photographers. He laughed and smiled as he sat in the dock, showing no remorse or regret for taking the lives of 2 people and ruining the lives of so many others. He argued that he had been trapped in the marriage and that he didn't love Michaela, but his behavior had shown he was more than happy to string Michaela along if it meant he could benefit from. When it came time for him to testify as to what had happened on the night of September 4th, he told the court that Julie had been the one to attack him and he had acted in self-defense. At one point, taking a pen off of his interpreter and making a stabbing motion, before the judge intervened and told him to give the pen back to the interpreter. He said that he had been unhappy in his marriage and that he had felt forced to marry Michaela. The argument that he had acted in self-defense did not stand up. The amount of stab wounds that Michaela and Julie had suffered went way beyond what a reasonable person could consider self-defense. The work done by the police and the prosecution blew his self-defense story apart. The scene of the crime, the blood pattern analysis, and the damage done to the furniture painted a very different picture, that he had been the one to attack Michaela and Julie and not the other way around. Michaela and Julie's loved ones sat in the public gallery and cried as the CCTV footage of him walking through the town, still holding the knife, was played. The prosecution lawyer Dafydd Enoch told the courtroom that the marriage between the pair had been an unhappy one, compounded by the fact that Ensar missed Turkey, but he added that neither one of these things could excuse or explain why he had done what he had done, something he called the senseless slaughter born out of premeditated, ruthless violence. Richard Rook from the South Central Ambulance Service testified at the trial, saying he would never forget the look in Michaela's eyes, saying it was one of suffering and pain, a look he would take with him to the grave. Casey also testified, saying she had rushed upstairs with Julie after hearing the commotion. She added that testifying in court was the hardest thing she had ever had to do. May 31st, 2012, the jury returned their verdict, and Sargal was found guilty of the attempted murder of Casey and the murders of Julie and Michaela. He was sentenced to life in prison with 36 years for each murder and 12 for the charge of attempted murder. With these sentences running concurrently, the judge told him, "I have no doubt that you intended to kill your wife Michaela and your mother-in-law Julie. These brutal murders were planned and premeditated. You say you were unhappy here and didn't get on with your mother-in-law. Totally reject any suggestion that anything she said or did provides you with any mitigation the pain and suffering you have caused to the family. will plainly be long-lasting and with them for the remainder of their lives. Ensar nodded and smiled as the sentence was given. As he was led out of the dock, Ensar began to smile, laughing and pointing at himself as he mouthed, "Me, me, me," for the loved ones left behind. They said no sentence would ever be enough. Mem said, "I met Julie when I was 23 years old, and I was so lucky to have 12 years with the one and only love of my life. I know that she loved me as much as I loved her." He also said that he was glad the jury had seen through what was being said about Julie during the trial and the way she had been characterized by the defense's case, with them arguing that she had been the one to instigate it. Following Ensar's conviction, Detective Chief Inspector Joe Kidman said, in trying to evade responsibility for his crimes, Ensar Goel sought to attack the character of these two women he had murdered. This has only added to the terrible ordeal of the family who have attended each day and listened to all the evidence. Despite their anguish, they have shown great dignity throughout. The devastation caused on the night of September 4th is difficult to comprehend. For the ones left behind, the pain is unimaginable. Mamet said, "There's a great big void in my life. Now, 2 children are left without a grandma, a mother, and a father. He took everything. I didn't know till then that they were my only reason to live, my only joy in life." Story 3. Leighton in New South Wales, Australia. A small and rural town with a population of around 10,000 people. In 2015, it was home to 26-year-old Stephanie Scott and her fiancé Aaron. The pair had met as children playing sports together where they grew up. They had remained good friends until Aaron's 21st birthday party, where things blossomed into a romantic relationship. Stephanie, affectionately nicknamed Button Nose by her family, was described as warm and intelligent with a huge smile. She had very much taken after her dad in terms of a career. Her father, Robert, was a teacher, and Stephanie caught the same bug, teaching English and drama at Leighton High School. She poured so much time into her students and took a lot of pride in her lessons, having a huge amount of respect from her colleagues. Also, April 11th, 2015 would be hers and Aaron's wedding day, and ever the perfectionist Stephanie had put months into every little detail, telling people it was going to come together just perfectly. She had just had her bachelorette party. The honeymoon in Tahiti was booked, and the only thing left to do for now was for the couple to perfect their first dance, which they were taking many lessons in preparation for. The first weekend of April meant that the big day was now just days away, and Aaron asked if Stephanie wanted to join him out of town for a party, but she said she would leave it, having a couple of more bits left to sort out. One of these things was getting a final plan in place for her students while she was away on her honeymoon. April 5th, 2015 was Easter Sunday, and at about 11 a.m., Stephanie headed into her school to drop off the handover for the substitute teacher. Stephanie parked her car outside and then walked to meet a colleague that lived near the school. They both went together to unlock the gate, with Stephanie locking it after her and keeping hold of the keys as she headed for the English teacher staff room. Whilst there, she sent an email to a bus company confirming the transport for her guests to get to the wedding, and after this she carried on working for another couple of hours. Happy everything was finally sorted, she left the admin block, keys in her bag, heading for the gates. Aaron knew she was going to be away for a few hours, of course, but as the sun started to set and there was still no word from her, something felt wrong. He had been texting her the previous evening and in the morning getting prompt replies, but since the middle of the afternoon he had heard nothing back. He got home at around 7:20 p.m., but there was still no sign of her, and her car wasn't outside either. Aaron tried to put his panic aside, hoping maybe the stress of the wedding and leaving her students for so long meant she just needed a little space, but to be completely silent like this was just not like her. Although planning a wedding is stressful to say the least, Stephanie had by all accounts very much enjoyed the process, and in the previous days she had been telling all of her students about her dress and the wedding food. This wasn't someone that seemed nervous or overwhelmed. This was someone that was excited and ready for the big day. Aaron slept badly and woke up early, messaging her again before he started calling her family. 430 that afternoon, over 24 hours since anyone had heard from Stephanie. Aaron went to Leon police station to report his fiancée missing. Police wondered that because her car was also missing, if she had left the school and got into an accident, possibly rolling into a ditch or a creek and getting stuck there. Helicopters were deployed to start searching the area as officers on the ground went straight to her last known location, Leon High School. Due to it being Easter Sunday, few people were in the school that day, which limited the witnesses but also ruled out hundreds of people, actually making the police's job a lot easier. A check of the alarm inside Stephanie's classroom showed that she had disarmed it at 1:31 p.m. and rearmed it at 1:38 p.m., so they knew she was definitely around at that time. But after this, there was nothing really to note. They tried to use Find My iPhone, but it was turned off. There was also no activity on her bank accounts or social media since Saturday 4th. By the 7th of April, appeals were now underway via social media, with one post being shared over 1,500 times in just a few hours. Local news stations were running the story, and hundreds in the small community were out searching. But given how out of character this was, and now being less than a week away from her wedding day, hope was quickly starting to fade. Her mother, Marilyn, said, "I think if we don't find her today, you can't let yourself think about it, but you do." 9 reporter Aaron Willing is at Leon High School tonight. Aaron, why did police return to the school today? Police did not only return here for much of the day, they are still in fact here at the school. Now they're using digital mapping technology to mark out the grounds of the school, as well as the room where Stephanie would have been working the day that she vanished. One witness who was around Leon High School on Easter Sunday said that at 2 p.m. she had heard some noises that sounded like things being moved or dragged across the ground. She remembered she saw Stephanie's car underneath a covered walkway, but of course didn't think anything of it. But she did also notice her car disappear. Another witness who worked in the school told detectives she had a strange conversation with one of the school's cleaners the following Monday morning, as the school was now buzzing with gossip, speculation, and worry. The witness asked the cleaner if he had seen her before she disappeared. He said he hadn't. When they asked him if he thought Stephanie might have run away because of nerves about the wedding, she said he let out an odd and inappropriate giggle that left her with an uneasy feeling, and his face was covered in scratches. The cleaner was 24-year-old Vincent Stamford, and he had to be questioned. Detectives briefly spoke to Vincent, and he said he had popped into the school to take out the bins despite not being scheduled, but he hadn't been there long as he had to go food shopping. He said he didn't see Stephanie while he was there and couldn't help them. But hey, good luck with your search, he said while his vehicle had been picked up driving away from the school just after 3:30 p.m., which went with the times he said he was there. When officers called the store, he claimed he went to, they said that due to the dates they were actually closed. He would have no reason to lie about the store he had gone to, and as a result, Vincent was now a person of interest. Police went to interview him again, this time more thoroughly. He lived at his mother's house, and when they got there, she let them in. Vincent wasn't there at the time, but his mother gave police permission to walk through her home and take a look. It was here that they found a set of keys and a red and white lanyard, keys that matched description of Stephanie Scott's. As they were bagging things up, Vincent returned in his car. They seized his vehicle right away and found some MDF boards in the back with what appeared to be blood on them. Outside the front of the house, they had spotted some tire tracks which didn't match his vehicle. They also found a used condom on the ground, the wrapper of which was inside his bedroom. They asked him where he had been that day, and he told them he was out taking photographs, pointing to the camera on his front passenger seat. Detectives asked if they could look at it, and he shrugged and said, "Sure." Alarmingly, when they turned it on, the first images they found were of a burnt female corpse lying in a wooded area. He told them they were just from a film and that he had taken them because he thought they were funny, but police knew what they were looking at was the body of Stephanie. Vincent Stanford was placed under arrest in connection with the disappearance and now likely murder of Stephanie Scott. Police last night arrested her co-worker, 24-year-old Vincent Stanford, a high school cleaner. I reckon I was just horrified when I heard the news. Couldn't quite comprehend it for a while. Police found Miss Scott's car dumped in a paddock, about 8.5 kilometers from where she was last seen, but they're yet to find her body. It's tragic for the family. It's tragic for the people of Leon. It's tragic for the people of NSW and society in general. She'd understand everything. If you had problems at home, had problems anywhere, you could just speak to her about it. She was amazing. I just want to thank her heaps for everything she's done for us, and we're still praying for her. She was just such a lovely, vibrant person that fitted in with everyone and everything. She was well loved by the teachers, the students, and everyone that virtually met her. Family and friends who'd traveled from overseas for a wedding now faced the devastating task of arranging a funeral. Vincent's phone and laptop were full of pictures of underage girls, both from inside Leon High School and off the internet, in various sexual and shockingly graphic situations, including bestiality. There were also photos of women he had clearly been following around town without them knowing. A very sinister picture and pattern of behavior was being painted, and despite them not yet finding her body on April 9th, Vincent Stanford was charged with the murder of Stephanie. They continued trying to pinpoint the area the photos of the body might have been taken. On April 10th, 2015, 5 days after she had last been seen, another witness walked into the police station to say that he had seen a vehicle driving near a canal just before 4 p.m. On Easter Sunday. He said a man had got out and thrown what looked like a laptop into the water before speeding off. Didn't take police long to recover the laptop, and it was confirmed to be Stephanie's. Police divers have joined the search for the body of murdered bride-to-be Stephanie Scott in the new South Wales Riverina. 9's Natalia Cooper is in Leon this morning in a touching scene behind me. Natalia, what's the latest on the investigation? The search has resumed for the body of 26-year-old school teacher Stephanie Scott. Police are searching fields and a vineyard near where the young teacher's red Mazda was found earlier this week. Police divers are also searching a canal in that area, and it's believed they have retrieved a laptop from the canal. Now, you mentioned the shrine that is growing behind me. has been visited by so many people throughout the morning, and so many emotions have been seen here. People are absolutely devastated, whether they knew her personally or they didn't know her at all. This tragedy has really affected everyone in this town. We know that her family and her fiancé were here last night. They lit candles. They read some of the tributes, and they were clearly distraught and comforting each other. One more piece of information I have for you is that police are desperate to find anyone who saw this white Yuta believed to belong to Vincent Stanford, the man who was accused of murdering Stephanie Scott. They need to contact police urgently. Brett, Natalia Cooper, and Leighton, thank you. Following this, the search for her would finally come to a devastating end. 60 miles from Leighton High School, and just the day before what should have been her wedding day, Stephanie Scott's burned body was found. She was in a patch of woodland in the Cocoera National Park. She had been hit over the head 40 times, and the cause of death was blunt force trauma. She had also been stabbed in the neck before being dumped and set on fire. These confirmed that the photos on Vincent's phone were most definitely of Stephanie. Vincent then contacted the police voluntarily and asked to talk to them. At this point, being sat in a cell, he had no idea that Stephanie's body had been found. He sat down and told them everything, including where they could find Stephanie. Where was she when you first saw her? She was in the staff room, upstairs for the English drama math teacher. What was she doing? She was working on a computer. Was the staff room door open or closed? Open. Where were you at that time? I was working. Had a high-pressure cleaner to clean the garbage bins. We put some of the garbage bins upstairs. That's when I saw her in the classroom. Yes. Did you say anything to her that time? No. Did she say anything to you? No. Did she see you? Think so. You think so? I walked behind the door so she would probably know I was there. We spoke to you on Wednesday night on the 8th. Yes. And we spoke to you about some scratches that I can still see on your face. Yes. Can you tell me where you got those scratches from? Several of them are from Stephanie's cut. How did she do that? Don't know anyone else. When did she do that? When I came to her. When you came to her. Yes. Can you just tell me exactly what happened when she walked into the room? You said you were waiting for her to come in. You were waiting for her to finish her work. Yes. What exactly happened when she finished her work? What did you do? I picked her up from behind with my right hand over her mouth and my left hand around her middle. I dragged her into the store, closed the door behind us. I chucked her on the floor and I beat her to death. You say with your fists? Yes. Did you use any other weapon? I did use a knife as well. You said you got a feeling that you had to do it. What feeling? Can you describe that to me? Upon seeing her, what feeling came over you? What did you feel? That I had to kill her. I've had a lot of violent thoughts, but I've never acted on them. Okay, so when you say you had a lot of violent thoughts, can you describe to me what those thoughts have been? Killing various people I've met. Yes. Hurting them. That's about it. Really. Is there any reason why you wanted to kill these people or hurt these people? I think I might have some mental problems, but I've never done anything to make it to the surface. Can you tell me why you got angry at Stephanie and why you wanted to kill her? I didn't really feel anger. I just wanted to kill her. So you didn't feel anger? No. So you just wanted to kill her? Okay. So you just wanted to kill her? Yes. Can you tell me why you wanted to kill her? I don't know. I don't know. It's just my mental health acting up again. Vincent then recalled that he had felt hungry and drove home for a sandwich and coffee. leaving Stephanie, lying on the floor of the storage room. After finishing his food, he returned to the school, placed her body in the trunk of her own car before going back into clean. After this, he drove her master to his house, leaving it parked outside, while he talked to his mom and brother. In the early hours of what was now Easter Monday, Vincent drove Stephanie's car to Coco Par National Park. So when you've taken her out of the boot, did you take the clothes off her in the boot? Or did you take clothes off her in the ground? On the ground. On the ground. Yeah. Okay. Now, obviously, she had at this stage there was a lot of blood and she had injuries to her face. Did you notice any swelling or the right side of her face? Yep. It's quite up. Near her eye. Yep. And that's from when you punched her when she was around. Okay. Then what did you use match to light the fire or did you use cigarette? I put some petrol on a stick and I lit a match on that. Yep. And I chucked the stick on there. Yep. And where did the match? Where did you put it? I think it's still there. Probably. Did you throw that in the fire? Or just drop it? No, I dropped it where the stick was. Okay. Is that far away from the body or no? No. So when you traveled, did you stay around long to watch your body burn or no? I left straight away. You left straight away. Yeah, it was well light. Took a second. Petrol starts fast. So, okay. On your camera, you had 2 photos of a deceased body. Yes. Are those photos of Stephanie? Yes. Can you tell me why those photos are of Stephanie? No. Why? Did you keep the bra? Did you dispose of anything else or why the bra? I honestly don't know. You don't know. Maybe I wanted a souvenir. Yep. Something to remember it by. Probably, but I have no real reason to keep it. Why the bra? Though? Why not any other item? I think it was clean. Did you wash the bra? Chucked it in the washing once. Yeah. Home or at school? At home? At home. Okay. What about her earrings? Engagement ring? I don't know. I might have taken that off earlier. Earlier? Where did you take those off? Probably when I was at home. No, when I went and collected all her stuff at the high school. Would have been not her earrings though, but her engagement ring. You remember taking that? Yeah. The high school. Where did you put her engagement ring? I don't know. Chucked so much stuff out. So you got rid of that with the clothes, did you? I must have chucked it in a bin somewhere when I chucked everything else out. He had taken her engagement and graduation ring and sent these along with Stephanie's driver's license to his identical twin brother Marcus, who was living in Adelaide. Marcus sold her rings at a jeweler store and destroyed her license. Did you sexually assault Stephanie? No. While she was alive? No. Or deceased? No. Although Vincent was still trying to deny any sexual assault took place. Officers knew that this was not true and Vincent would also face further charges of aggravated sexual assault and inflicting actual bodily harm. Vincent Stanford had been born in Australia, but his family had moved to the Netherlands when he was just 3 years old before moving back to New South Wales later on. He told police he had dreamed about killing someone as early as 7 years old and had choked his teacher when he was 12. His classmates used to call him Psycho because of his violent outbursts. Vincent was made to attend what was called a behavior school because of his unruly behavior, limited social skills, limited friendships, and oppositional behavior. He said he was never able to adapt to society, adding, "I would have to require emotions. I have almost none." He was later admitted to an adolescent psychiatric center where he was diagnosed with autism and oppositional defiant disorder. After he was released, Vincent told police he wanted to go to university or join the army, but he was rejected by both. Was after this that he went on to get a series of jobs before getting the job as the cleaner at Leon High School. He had only been hired on a 5-week contract, but this had been extended. When he started to work in the school, he often lurked in the girls' toilets when students were on their lunch break. From delving deeper into his phone, detectives found that Vincent had stalked a 12-year-old girl in the school and 2 other women who worked in nearby shops before he killed Stephanie. They found almost 2,000 photos of the 12-year-old on his phone, and he had even written about her in a journal. He had followed her home several times and started taking notes of when she was out and who else was in her house. One of his entries read, "Home alone, 1540. Time enough to abduct." It is thought that his intended target was initially this young girl, and when this plan didn't happen, he went to the school, where he set his sights on Stephanie. Results from inside his vehicle came back and showed that the stains on the MDF boards were positive for Stephanie's DNA. And inside the Stamford home, they found Stephanie's blood on a knife, on some lining to the inside of her own car, on some condom packets, and they also found her bra. As Vincent carried on with his progressively more disturbing interviews, the businesses in Leon closed along with the classes at Leon High School being canceled so that the community could attend a public memorial and celebration of life for Stephanie. As a community, we feel quite helpless. There's not much we can do to make this any better for the families involved and the friends that are involved. It was lovely to be able to be part of such an amazing tribute. After joining in a moment's silence to honor Stephanie, residents released balloons, filling the sky with yellows. The release of the balloons was like letting her spirit now roam free in the sky. We pray for the eternal rest of Stephanie Scott and for the comfort and healing of her family. Everybody wore yellow, her favorite color, and what should have been hers and Aaron's first dance song, Keith Urban's Making Memories of Us, played as everyone said goodbye. It was a huge turnout of around 1,000 people, and later on in the picturesque venue that was supposed to host the couple's wedding, Stephanie's funeral would be held. After this, more shock would come for the family when police announced that they had made a second arrest in Stephanie's case. In handcuffs, wearing a Star Wars jumper, Marcus Stanford is led into court, New South Wales. Detectives waiting for him with plane tickets at the ready. The 24-year-old was arrested about 7 o'clock this morning at his foreign home in the Adelaide Hills. Neighbors stunned that the latest chapter in a murder case which shocked the nation played out on their doorstep. It's quite disturbing and quite shocking for our little street, our little community, and it's sad that the case is, I guess, continuing on for the family as well. Marcus Stanford can't be shown because he is Vincent's identical twin. His colleagues at an Adelaide Hills flower farm say he has little to do with them outside work. Was I shocked? Not really. Marcus Stanford didn't have a lawyer. When the magistrate asked if there was any reason he shouldn't be taken to Leighton, he told the court in his thick Dutch accent that he'd never been there, so he wouldn't need to go back. But he'll be on a flight to Sydney in custody tomorrow morning. Despite his confessions, it actually wasn't clear how things would go in terms of a court case, as Vincent did not initially enter a plea. But based on all the evidence presented by the prosecution and police, it was ruled that the case was definitely capable of resulting in a conviction before a jury, and he was committed to stand trial. Psychological tests had been carried out by experts, and they revealed that they believed he was absolutely a serial killer in the making. He was void of emotion or empathy. He was remorseless and unbothered, often laughing and shrugging things off as he spoke. Fortunately for Stephanie's loved ones, they would be spared any such trial. Breaking news. This morning, a school cleaner has pleaded guilty to the rape and murder of teacher Stephanie Scott in regional New South Wales. 25-year-old Vincent Stanford has appeared in the Supreme Court in Sydney this morning over the 2015 killing. As in July 2016, Vincent Stanford finally pleaded guilty to her rape and murder. While the courts looked into his sentencing, Vincent's twin brother Marcus would also face his own charges after he admitted to selling Stephanie's rings, destroying evidence, and helping Vincent to cover things up. He was sentenced to 15 months in prison. However, I have determined that there is no practical purpose in allowing for a parole period at all in the sentence I will impose. Would you stand up, please, Mr. Stanford, for the offense of being an accessory after the fact to the murder of Stephanie Scott? You are convicted. You are sentenced to imprisonment for a fixed term of 1 year and 3 months. The sentence is to date from the 10th of June 2015 and will expire on the 9th of September 2016. Without your plea of guilty, it would have been a sentence of 1 year and 8 months. He was subsequently released in October 2016. Almost 60,000 people signed a petition calling for this to be appealed, describing his sentence as pathetic. But nonetheless, Marcus came out of prison and briefly went back to Leon with his mother. It is unknown where he is now after residents made it clear he wasn't welcome there. I just want to say sorry for what I've done, and for the hurt I caused the family. And for now, I hope I won't cause any more trouble. I did a really stupid thing, and unfortunately I can't take it back. I don't want anything to do with him. I have no contact with him, and I don't want any, he said. The twins' father, Steve, said he was baffled and horrified by Vincent's crimes. I don't want to call him. I don't want to sit down with him. I don't want anything to do with him. Don't know why he did it. I never asked why he did it. And to be honest, I don't want to know. The day before Stephanie would have turned 28 years old, Vincent Stanford was sentenced to life in prison for murder and 15 years for aggravated sexual assault. I am satisfied that this is a case of murder that clearly falls within the worst category. Mr. Stanford, would you stand up, please? For the aggravated sexual assault and the murder of Stephanie Claire Scott, you are convicted. Both of the sentences I impose will take effect from the 8th of April 2015. For the aggravated sexual assault, you are sentenced to imprisonment for 15 years. I decline to nominate a proportion of that sentence as a non-parole period, as there is no utility in doing so. For the murder of Stephanie Scott, you are sentenced to imprisonment for life. In court, Stephanie's mother, Marilyn, said Vincent was too pathetic and inept to make a life of his own, so he chose to take a life he had no right to. We will never know what she suffered, but to know that she suffered at all is too difficult to bear. We need to be able to fade from public view to mourn our beautiful girl and work our way through our grief. We will not be answering any questions, participating in any interviews or any programs in the future. Tomorrow we begin to celebrate Stephanie's too short, amazing life. This should be her 28th birthday, the second one we celebrate without her. We will be having a cup of tea and a mint slice biscuit at 3, so please join us. Thank you. Stephanie's family called for more stringent screening and assessments of employees working at schools, and they also settled a civil case privately with the New South Wales Education Department. Their lawyer said more tragedy would strike for the Scott family when just over a year later, Stephanie's father, Robert, would lose his life in a freak accident when a tree fell on him, crushing him to death. The two would be laid to rest at the same place his daughter was. After the loss of Stephanie, Aaron moved to Europe to try and escape some of the pain associated with New South Wales. 5 years after losing her, he found love again and celebrated his engagement to Samantha. The Leighton mayor said the loss of Stephanie is something the community will never forget, and there were even books written about her case. People simply can't believe something of that nature happened here. It is just unheard of. The whole circumstances around it. To think her life ended as it did when it was just starting. The mayor said her family hoped that Stephanie is remembered for all of her amazing traits and her passion for teaching, helping, and coaching people. They said, "We need to be kind to ourselves and let the music and fun back in." Story for Mansfield, a fascinating and historic market town in Nottinghamshire in the UK. With gorgeous architecture and a remarkable history, there really is plenty to do and see here. One of the people that called this place home was 18-year-old Liam Gray. Liam had been born into a loving family and was one of 4 children, having 3 siblings, Paige, Madison, and Freddie. Liam was popular and well-loved by those who knew him, with his mother Joan describing him as happy-go-lucky. He loved to make people laugh and have fun, never taking himself too seriously. He was a passionate supporter of his beloved Liverpool Football Club, and one of his former teachers said he had a heart of gold and always looked out for and cared for other people. He was also close to his grandfather John, affectionately known as Pops, and Liam would move in with him when he was in his teens after having a tough time at school. He had a close group of friends and an especially close bond with Ree, his best friend. The pair were as close as brothers and spent most of their time together, with Madison calling them inseparable. They had grown up together and gone to the same schools, and their friendship had gone from strength to strength. Ree lived across the road from Liam and Pops, and Ree was equally close to Pops, saying he would be lost without him. Liam and his grandfather lived on Gladstone Street, and after moving, Liam introduced Ree to one of his other friends, Jonathan Treadgold. 17-year-old Jonathan's early life had been troubled, and he had spent various times in the care of social services following drug use and domestic violence in the family home. He was also having run-ins with the law from the age of 14, with a criminal record including threatening behavior and criminal damage. Liam, being the caring young man he was, decided to take Jonathan under his wing and try and be there for him as a friend and a support system. He recognized that Jonathan had various struggles and wanted to help him turn his life around. Joan wasn't too sure, though. She said there was just something about Jonathan that bothered her, and she wasn't keen on her son hanging around with him. Liam's sister had also heard things about Jonathan and his behavior, but she was prepared to put that aside, give him a chance, and judge for herself what he was like. Liam invited Jonathan to hang out with him on one occasion, asking him if he wanted to go to a family party at Joan's house. Jonathan had far too much to drink and became more and more angry and volatile, culminating in him assaulting someone. Liam was still determined to be there for Jonathan and showcased the same deep loyalty that he showed to all his friends. When he was 17, Liam got news that changed everything. His partner was expecting a baby. Liam was elated, excited to become a father and throw himself into the challenges and joys of parenthood that awaited him. Ree said that Liam was over the moon with impending fatherhood. Liam continued to mature, and knowing that it was going to be a monumental change in his life. He began to see his friends less as he prepared to meet his new baby. On July 18, 2019, Liam and his partner of 3 years welcomed their first child, a baby girl. Life was good, and Liam was happy. August 1st, 2019. It was a bright and beautiful summer's day in Mansfield. On August 2nd, Liam and his partner were moving to Birmingham with their baby to start their next chapter as a family. Whilst his family were going to miss him and were sad he was moving away, they supported him and he was ready to take the leap. He decided to spend his last day in Mansfield with his two closest friends. Liam, Jonathan, and Ree were seen going into a local shop to purchase alcohol before going back to Pop's house. On Gladstone Street, they sat in the garden and drank and filmed a series of Snapchat videos. Whilst there, Liam asked Jonathan if he was going to change out of his tracksuit bottoms to make himself look a bit smarter, as he wasn't yet 18 and he didn't want him to draw attention to himself. Liam said he could wear a pair of his jeans if he wanted to, and after Jonathan got changed, the three of them headed off to a nearby pub. As they were walking through the park, Ree received a message. It was from Jonathan's sister's boyfriend, the contents of which are not clear, but it sparked an argument. Reese showed the message to the other two, and Liam claimed he would hit the male who had sent the message in an attempt to stick up for Jonathan's sister. Jonathan grew incredibly angry, and the argument continued to escalate. As the situation got worse, Liam told him if he was going to keep behaving like that, he needed to go away and leave the jeans back at the house. After Jonathan had gone, Liam wanted to try and de-escalate the situation and not have his last day ruined. So they agreed to go back to the house to get Jonathan and try and salvage the rest of the day. When Jonathan arrived at the house, Pops was there in the living room. Liam and Reese got back just 4 minutes later, and Liam was keen to try and resolve the argument. Ree waited outside. Roughly a minute later, Jonathan came running out of the house telling Reese, "I've stabbed him. I've *******ing killed him." Jonathan then ran away. Ree immediately went inside, unsure as to whether or not it was all just hot air or if he had actually hurt Liam. When Ree went inside, he found Liam in the dining room. He was bleeding profusely from his chest and holding towels there to try and stop it before asking for the emergency services. Reese called 999 and then gave the phone to Pops for him to talk to the operator. "Now, do you know who the person is who stabbed him?" "Yes, John Threadgold." John Threadgold. Liam then fell to the floor, and Pops tried his best to help him and administer aid, putting pressure on the wound to try and stop the bleed. "Was there anybody able to let the crew in?" "Yes, I sent somebody on the front." When the paramedics arrived on scene, Ree ran out to meet them. They tried to stabilize him as much as possible and treat his injuries. The police were also dispatched, and when they got there, they put Reese into the back of their car. The news soon made it to Joe and that Pop's house had the emergency services outside and that Liam had been stabbed by Jonathan. Superintendent Kevin Broadhead would dispatch more officers as they needed to find Jonathan and find him quickly. They would soon get some important information. The police received a call from the owner of a local sandwich shop saying that Jonathan was climbing over the wall at the back of the shop. He told the owner that he had been involved in a serious incident and had acted in self-defense, lifting up his shirt and appearing to show injuries. The police immediately linked it to the stabbing of Liam and sent more officers over there to arrest Jonathan. The crew are always patient now. He stopped breathing. He's unconscious, and He stopped breathing. At 3:15 p.m., Joanne and one of Liam's sisters arrived. At the house on Gladstone Street, the crew were still there and still battling. To save him, they had to cut his chest open and manually keep his heart going. The paramedics decided against taking him to hospital in the air ambulance, as this would have meant they could not work on him whilst in the air. So the decision was made to transport him to the hospital by road. Liam was then put into the back of the ambulance, and Joanne was taken to see him by an officer. She told him that she loved him, as her beloved son fought for his life. He was then rushed to Queen's Medical Center in Nottingham. The police were still hunting for Jonathan Treadgold, who had run away from the sandwich shop. But then another call came in. The person said he was at a house in Moundsfield, where his mother was visiting a friend. He had told his mother and her friend that he had stabbed Liam and that Liam was dead. The arrest was caught on the police's body cam footage at 3:33 p.m. He told the officers that Liam had been the one to instigate it and had tried to stab him, and that he had acted in self-defense. He was arrested on suspicion of causing grievous bodily harm. Several hours after his arrest, he was breathalyzed, and even after the time that had passed, his blood alcohol level was still 3 times the legal drink drive limit, so he had clearly consumed a significant amount of alcohol. After getting to the hospital, Liam was taken straight into open heart surgery to try and save him, despite the best efforts of the medical staff, and after an hour and a half of trying to keep him alive, Liam succumbed to his injuries and died. Liam's sister, Paige, would later say, "I just remember a doctor walking in with 2 nurses, and I knew then from the look on the doctor's face that Liam had passed. She ran out of the room and had a panic attack." Joan said she knew in that moment, too, that he had gone, and that her heart shattered. She tried to call her other daughter, Madison, who initially didn't answer. When she answered the second call, she said it felt like a piece of her was now gone, too. Madison collapsed, unable to process what was happening. Those in the community could not believe it and were in total shock, and many people shared tributes to him, talking about how he had impacted their lives and just how much he was going to be missed. Joan thanked the local community for all of their support and love, saying, "Liam was just 18 years old and just 2 weeks into being a father himself. It is with sadness and devastation that he has lost his life to such a horrific crime." Postmortem revealed that Liam had no defensive wounds, and the pathologist determined that it had been a jabbing motion when he had been stabbed. The knife had pierced his heart. Despite initially being arrested on suspicion of grievous bodily harm, this was now a murder inquiry. The police began to go through the CCTV footage to piece together the events of that day and try and work out how this had all come to be. They watched the footage of them going into the shop and buying the alcohol. Nothing seemed unusual and everything looked fine. They were then caught walking down the road before stopping in the park. The park was not covered by CCTV cameras. In his interviews, Jonathan said he had fled the park in a hurry after the arguments had broken out in order to get away from Liam, but the footage showed him walking and not running. Liam and Ree were seen on CCTV walking back, too. Jonathan was interviewed again, where he now said, although he had picked the knife up, he had done so in self-defense and that he had been waving it around to scare him off, and this was how Liam had been stabbed. But based on what Pops had seen when he witnessed the attack and what was known about Jonathan's past, including a conviction 6 weeks prior for assaulting his girlfriend, his version of events just was not stacking up. The CCTV footage showed Jonathan running from Gladstone Street just 1 minute after Liam had gone into the house. When police searched the house, they found the knife in the kitchen covered in Liam's blood and Jonathan's fingerprints. Jonathan also alleged in his interviews that Liam had bullied and picked on him for years and showed scars on his body saying Liam had caused them, but the investigation would reveal the truth. The police investigating Liam's death trolled through the various records of social services, and they determined that the healed scars on Jonathan's body had not been caused by Liam but were instead self-inflicted. There was nothing to substantiate his claims that Liam had bullied him or treated him badly. Superintendent Kevin Broadhead said he believed that Jonathan was jealous of Liam, starting a new life with his family in Birmingham and beginning an exciting chapter when his own life was so chaotic. Based on all of the evidence they gathered, Jonathan Treadgold was charged with murder. On the 18th of August, a fundraising event was held to generate funds to pay for a funeral for Liam, raise money for his newborn baby, and donate to a charity tackling knife crime. A GoFundMe was also set up. When his funeral was held, hundreds of mourners lined the streets as his coffin, draped in a Liverpool Football Club flag, was taken into St. Peter and St. Paul's Church. Those following the coffin wore shirts with a photograph of Liam on them with "Always loved, never forgotten, forever missed" written on them too. Liam's devastated grandfather, who had tried to save his life, paid tribute to him. "Liam, I am missing you terribly. I tried so much to help you, and I live that day every day. My best was not good enough, and I am so sorry. I hope you are happy with the angels. Love you forever." The Reverend conducting the service told those in attendance, "We need to go away not remembering the manner of Liam's death and the tragedy that it is, but remember the gift of life he was to each and every one of you here, and we go away with the message, then the knife. We want young people to grow up safe, to not have their lives taken or destroyed." The funeral was a reflection of just how loved Liam was and how much of an impact he had on those he knew. Because he was 17 when the stabbing took place, Jonathan Treadgold was tried as a child, something that greatly upset Joanne. On the 1st of November, he appeared in court and entered a plea of not guilty to the charge of murder. He was told his trial would begin the following year. Because of his not guilty plea, the defense requested a second postmortem to be carried out on Liam's body. Joanne said it was disgraceful that he was putting Liam's family through yet more pain and devastation with his not guilty plea. Also, due to his age, there was initially a ban on his name and identity being reported. The Mansfield Chad newspaper made an application for the restrictions to be lifted, and the judge remarked, "That is something I am mindful to do today. It seems to me to be entirely right that today's hearing should name the defendant." And with that, Jonathan Treadgold was unmasked and named in the press. Throughout the trial, Liam's family wore shirts with his face on it, showing that no matter how painful it was going to be, they were going to be there for him and his memory. During the proceedings, Jonathan was disrespectful and disruptive in court. He wouldn't take to the stand. He wouldn't speak, and he would not give any reason as to why he had stabbed Liam, someone who had been a good and loyal friend and really looked after him. Paige said that she could tell from the look on his face that he wasn't sorry for what he had done at all. The evidence put before the court painted a devastating picture. A young man, a new father, about to start a new chapter in his life, taken in a violent and disturbing attack. February 7, 2020. The jury returned their verdict. Jonathan Treadgold was unanimously found guilty and showed no emotion as the verdict was given. All he said was, "Sound." Shouts of yes could be heard from the public gallery as Liam's family were elated that he had been convicted of his murder. Outside the courts, Joan read a statement on behalf of the family. No family should experience this pain. Lives have been irreparably shattered. No sentence could ever adequately reflect our loss. We will never see Liam again, hear his laugh, or see our phones flash with an incoming call from him. He was stolen from our lives. We'd like to thank everyone who tried to help and save Liam, and we appreciate everything they did. Monday, February 10th, 2020. At Nottingham Crown Court, Jonathan Treadgold was sentenced to a minimum of 16 years in prison for the murder of Liam Gray. Justice Gregory Dixon said, "This was done in anger, drink, and spite, not in fear." The judge added that he could serve longer than 16 years, as it would be for the parole board to determine whether or not he was safe to be released. And if they deemed that he wasn't, then he would stay in custody. Following his sentencing, Jones said, "I don't think it's long enough, but there's not much more to say. The murder of Liam Gray was a senseless, tragic, and brutal one." Paige said she reminds his daughter of him every day, adding that she gets her personality from Liam as she continues to grow up, surrounded by the love of her family. The legacy of her beloved father will continue to live on through her. The tragedy of this case is best summed up by the words of his mother, Joanne. "There are so many things that Liam never got to do. He hadn't learned to drive, been to college, got a stable job, got married, bought a house, or had the chance to parent his daughter and watch her grow up. We as a family have been robbed of watching him do all that, too." Story 5. We're in St. John's in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada for today's case. Back in 2016, when it was home to 46-year-old Marcel Reardon. Marcel was from a huge family with 2 sons himself, 3 brothers, and an older sister to whom he was particularly close, and nieces who he doted on. His sister Jacqueline said her brother was the class clown, always wanting to make everyone laugh just by being goofy. He was never afraid to make himself look silly in order to cheer people up. Marcel lived alone downtown after moving about quite a bit. He hadn't felt very settled anywhere for a while, but had recently found a new little apartment, which seemed to be working out for him. A big reason he was always looking for somewhere new and never quite felt at home was because in September 2015, tragedy hit the Reardon family. They lost their mother Evelyn to cancer, and Jacqueline said that for Marcel, who was the closest to her, the loss had really taken a toll on him. Jacqueline said that he had hit the bottle hard, leaning on it to numb his pain. Over the months since her death, Marcel's drinking had increased to a dangerous point, and he was spiraling into a terrible place, losing more and more control. He knew it was happening and was trying to pull it back, but was finding it tough now in the midst of an addiction. In early May 2016, several 911 calls were made about Marcel, saying he was intoxicated and acting aggressively, although when the officer got there, they deemed there wasn't enough to make an arrest, and Marcel seemed to be okay. One of his friends had also run into him at a downtown soup kitchen. She was ahead of him in the queue, and he ran up to her asking to cut in front. "Karen, can I jump ahead of you? I haven't slept and I haven't eaten in 3 days," he said. His family knew he was struggling, but not to this extent. On the evening of May 7, 2016, Marcel visited his sister Jacqueline and brother Scott for dinner. The mood was somber, as the aim of the meetup was to put flowers together as a tribute for their mother, something Marcel was finding tough. But the day went as smoothly as it could, and as Marcel said goodbye, they arranged to see each other a few days later for a family barbecue. He told them he was feeling more positive as he had signed up to a welding course so he could get himself back into work and into a good routine. This was great and encouraging news for his family. He hugged Jacqueline and headed off, shouting, "Love you, Jackie," as he went. "Don't forget to call me later," she shouted back. Just a few hours later, Marcel was sadly back on the police's radar again. He was arrested for breaching an order not to consume alcohol, and officers had picked him up in a subway, begging people for food. He was held in the lockup for his own safety, and when they were happy he had sobered up, they released him at about 1 p.m. the following day. He left the building in his red sweater, jacket, and his cargo bottoms. He pulled a newspaper out of his jacket and walked off into town. May 9, 2016. Authorities responded to a call from the Harborview Apartments at 91 Brazil Street. The building's superintendent, Jack, had called 911 when a resident had alerted him to something near the stairs to the rear of the building. Someone was lying on the ground, almost tucked under the steps, and the resident thought maybe they were sleeping rough and had taken shelter there overnight. But as they got closer, they saw a pool of blood and what looked like brain matter and bone nearby. The man was wearing a red sweater and cargo bottoms, and inside one of the pockets was a wallet. The wallet contained a folded-up birth certificate. This confirmed that they had found the body of Marcel Rarin. He had been beaten to death. There were marks in the mud near his body which showed he had been dragged there, so where he had actually been killed along with the why wasn't clear. On May 9, 2016, at approximately 9:35 a.m., RNC officers with Patrol Services Division, the Criminal Investigation Division, and the Forensic Identification Services responded to the report of a sudden death in the area of Brazil Street and St. John's. Based on the results of the autopsy performed by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, the RNC is confirming that the cause of death has been ruled as a homicide. The victim of the homicide has been identified as Marcel Rarin. At this time, there have been no arrests made and the investigation is ongoing. The RNC Major Crime Unit would like to thank the media, members of the public, for their assistance so far in this ongoing homicide investigation. We encourage you to ask people to come forward with any information. To contact the RNC, it's 729,800. To contact Crime Stoppers if they choose 1-800-222-8477. And they can also provide information anonymously to Crime Stoppers. nlcrimestoppers.com. How did Marcel Rarin die? The circumstances surrounding the man's death. Mr. Rarin's death is part of the investigation, and we're not going to be releasing that information at this time. Was there a weapon used? Again, with regards to a weapon, it's still part of the ongoing investigation. That information is of evidentiary value, so we will not be releasing it at this time. So you can't say if you've recovered anything in the way of a weapon. We can't say at this time. Do you believe he was killed at Harborview Apartments or on that grounds, or is it possible that that was just a dump site and there's another crime scene? Again, the circumstances with regards to the scene would be of evidentiary value and we can't comment on it at this time. So, no arrests have been made, but are there any suspects? Are you looking for anyone? We do not have any suspects at this time. However, we're continuing to actively investigate the matter, and we ask that if anybody has any information on this death to contact the RNC at 729-800 or Crime Stoppers at 1-800-22TF. from searching his name and working out the last known place he was living. The apartment he was found by had no links to him at all. More frustratingly still, the camera that was directly above where everything had happened wasn't working. Near to Marcel's body, however, they bagged up some cigarettes and a lighter as well as an empty beer bottle. The chief medical examiner in Newfoundland and Labrador since 1996 said that Marcel's injuries were some of the most damaging he had seen in all his years, so bad in fact that his family were not allowed to see him. The wounds were largely to the back of his head and were so severe it was impossible to determine how many times he had actually been hit, but it appeared that a hammer had been used. His blood alcohol level was about 4 times the legal limit. Authorities said they had seen a lot in their jobs before, but this case was particularly gory, disturbing, and draining for them. A lot of stories about him moving around from place to place in St. John's, having some problems with alcohol, problems with drugs. How did all of that happen? I don't know how it all happened, but I know, like I just said in my writing here, that he lived a life that we all weren't accustomed to, that not everybody was accustomed to. So, when it comes to his alcohol, I don't know how much he was into it in the past, but coming down here after my mom passed is when he, from my understanding, is when he got more into the alcohol. He lived with us for 6 months. We never had any issues with him at all. If he did have a six-pack, he'd drink it. He'd be quiet. We wouldn't have no issues. And I mean, it was me and Scott lived there. My children lived there. We never ever had any issues with him. So in the last year, how much contact would you have with him? How often did you see him? I used to see him about once a month, and he'd call 20 times a day for what? Just to have a conversation, ask me how I'm doing or what I'm doing. And the same here, just normal conversation. Same here. He would call all the time and he just wanted to talk. Had you heard of the murder in St. John's or a body being found in St. John's before the police approached you? I had read on Facebook. I had seen an article that had stated that the body of a young man was found. So it never occurred to you that it was Marcel? No. I kind of went to a body shake and couldn't breathe. And it was like, okay, seriously, who did it? My first thought was, who did it? Who did it? Was it who did it? I walked out in the kitchen to see 2 RNC officers and I was in shock. I think I still am, like I'm still in denial, still waiting for that phone call from him. Me too. When the phone rings at a certain time in the late time and it comes up a private number, I think, even though I know Marcel's gone, it's like Marcel's caught up. In my opinion, what's making it a little harder for them is that they didn't get to see him. Not even for a minute. They weren't allowed because there was too much damage done to him. An officer who had been patrolling the Shamrock City area the previous night said that he had given Marcel another warning for being drunk and disorderly outside a bar. This was at 8 p.m., just over 12 hours before he was found dead. The bar in question remembered him and could also point police to the people he was drinking with, Kevin O'Brien and Jessica Peach. They were actually even still outside the bar loitering around. The pair said they were drinking with Marcel, along with a woman called Ann Norris, but they had left him at around 1 o'clock a.m. and hadn't seen him after this. They were asked to come in and answer some questions at the station, and they said they were happy to. Both Kevin and Jessica had the same story. On the day of May 8th, they had been walking around the streets asking people for spare change. Marcel soon tagged along with them. At around 5 p.m., he briefly left the group to go and get some belongings, telling them he would meet them later. as he left and Norris joined Kevin and Jessica. Jessica knew him fairly well, but Kevin did not. He described her as friendly and attractive, and they got on well. Kevin and went to Anne's apartment just before 8 p.m. before heading back downtown, where Marcel joined them. This point, Marcel was far more intoxicated than they were, being loud and causing them to feel uncomfortable. Marcel had been drinking rum, vodka, beer, and had also taken some unknown pills. He started urinating in the streets before falling over and breaking a glass bottle inside his pocket. Kevin said it was upsetting, alarming, and clearly getting out of control. Jessica and Kevin wanted to distance themselves, and they had last seen him at about 1 o'clock am. The time frame for when he was killed was now getting smaller. So, where did he go? Officers asked the pair, and had told them she would get them a taxi and take him to her apartment for some drinks there. Her building was Harborview Apartments. Police now needed to talk to in Norris, and to their shock, hers was a name they actually knew, but for nothing even remotely bad. A lot of Anne's life had revolved around sports, and she was called a star athlete by people. She was frequently in the local papers and on the news for her and her team's achievements. She was a former basketball player, having played on the NUF Finland and Labrador under 19th team, and at the Junior National Championships and at the Canada Games. At the age of just 14, she was a top contender for a spot on the national karate team, soon gaining a black belt. She had attended the University of Prince Edward Island, and all seemed to be on the up for her. But now, years later, she had dropped off the athletics radar, and things had taken a turn. She had been charged with assault and threatening people, and had been in and out of various mental health clinics. They pulled her in for questioning, too. She was cooperative and told the police that she had taken Marcel back to hers, but he had refused to go inside as he wanted to carry on drinking in town. She had tried to coax him in, hoping they could have a few drinks there and he might just fall asleep, but Marcel wasn't having any of it. He wandered off, looking to get into a nightclub. She then went back into town and rejoined Kevin and Jessica at about 3:30 am. She said she didn't see Marcel again and was shaken up by what had happened to him, especially as this was just outside of her building. She wondered if Marcel had changed his mind and gone back to hers, realizing he wasn't going to get in anywhere, and that sleeping it off was the best thing he could do. But he had been met with someone outside that had maybe tried to rob him, or he had got into a drunken argument that had ended terribly, and was upset and asked if she could leave. Officers didn't have any more questions, so they let her go. Fortunately, the streets were lined with cameras, and they were making appeals for anyone that had been in the area at that time to come forward. But no one had seen anything. One camera from outside the bar showed, and Marcel and Kevin walking about. They were all by the taxis, just as they had said, and it was 12:44 a.m. Marcel was wearing the same red sweater and appeared to be staggering and falling over with, and trying to help him up at one point, and then stopped to tell Kevin that she was taking Marcel back to hers before she and Kevin turned back on themselves, walking away from Marcel. Marcel stumbled into the back area of the bars to some stairs. The pair helped him walk to the taxi and then got into the front seat. Kevin said goodbye to and through the window, and Anne and Marcel both drove off, leaving Kevin at the bar. This confirmed all the timelines so far, and the taxi driver could prove that he had dropped them both off at Anne's apartment building. Kevin and Jessica stayed in town buying a few things from a shop and bar hopping until about 3:30 a.m. when they met back up with, and just Asen had said. But now she was wearing different clothes and asked if she could take Jessica's backpack and she handed it over. By this time Jessica was very intoxicated, so she waited around while Kevin and walked to get some cigarettes down by the harbor. Kevin asked and why she had gone back with Marcel, and she said he was being a little bit of a dick that night. It was a mistake. While Kevin smoked on the edge of the harbor, he heard splashing around. He turned to see Jessica's backpack floating in the water and said they needed to stay and watch it sink before they left. And Kevin and Jessica then all headed to Anne's apartment to sleep. Just a few hours later, when everyone woke up and told them they both had to get out, and as they were leaving they ran into police officers and yellow tape outside the front of the building. They had no idea the person they had been with just hours before was lying dead just a few feet away from them. The backpack was very odd, and it could not be overlooked that Marcel was found at Anne's apartment building. They needed to locate this backpack, and to their surprise they found it pretty easily. Inside the bag was some rope and some light-colored jeans which were wrapped around a hammer. Inside the front pocket they found a wallet which linked to Jessica Peach. How and got everything in there without anyone seeing, or if they did, is not known. There still wasn't enough to make an arrest, so detectives placed and under surveillance while a search warrant for her apartment was obtained. They also realized that before Marcel was killed and was spotted hiding another backpack in a dumpster. This contained 2 cleavers, a hammer, some more rope, a mallet, and a flashlight. There were also a load of cleaning products inside as well. It was the same hammer that was located in the harbor, and the hammer they now believed was the murder weapon. They finally got the search warrant they needed and entered her apartment, which was almost totally empty. But it didn't look like she was moving out. It just looked like she lived there with nothing in it. The apartment superintendent, Jack, said she hadn't been there long, a matter of days in fact. He had met her on the 4th of May when she applied for one of the spaces. Her social worker had dropped off a check to pay the deposit, and Jack learned that she had just left a psychiatric care facility. When it came to moving in on the 6th of May, Jack said Anne was extremely nervous and awkward and had turned up with just 3 bags of clothes and a teddy bear. He said he felt really bad for her, so he got her some couch cushions to sleep on and a blanket to put over her window. Some of the residents chipped in to get her some toiletries too. Jack said she was very quiet and polite, and he was beyond shocked that she could be involved in something like this. In one of the rooms they found a light-colored scarf that she was wearing on the night Marcel had died, and this had specks of blood on it. In her bathroom bin they found something so crucial it would taken from being a person of interest to the only suspect in Marcel's murder. Walmart receipt timestamped at 10:40 p.m. on the very night she had been with Marcel, and just hours before he would have been killed. The receipt showed that a purchase was made for a knife and a hammer, and sure enough, the cameras at Walmart confirmed this. The cashiers described her as odd and her behavior unsettling. It was now the 13th of May, and unbelievably, the police that had under surveillance suddenly called the station and said that she had returned to the same Walmart and was browsing the tools section again. Backup was now on the way, and everyone was worrying that there could be a risk to someone in the store. As she was waiting to pay, the police team arrived, ready to place and Norris under arrest for the murder of Marcel Reardon. She was soon charged with first-degree murder and didn't try to deny anything, and admitted that she had hit Marcel over the head several times that morning, but she wasn't giving anyone a reason as to why. She said she had killed him at her apartment and dragged his body under the stairs before running back into town to meet with Kevin and Jessica, and unbeknownst to them, to dispose of the evidence. Marcel's family said they couldn't believe that and had done this all by herself. Marcel was a big man and they doubted her ability to be able to drag him and hide him herself. But police said they weren't looking for anyone else in the case and instead said it was all on her. A hearing was held to find whether there would be enough evidence to send this to trial, and it was determined that there was. Things moved quickly and it took just 4 hours to select the jury members. The now 30-year-old's murder trial began on January 22, 2018. I was in contact with the accused probably an hour or so ago. Mr. Buckingham spoke with her via telephone. I spoke with her in person about 10 to 15 minutes before the matter was called. Your Honor, this is Jonathan MacDonald. At this time, details are scarce. We really can't offer much in the way in terms of the details, but we can say that we have been retained by her and we will be representing her going forward. Despite admitting to killing him, and Norris pleaded not guilty, and her team was pushing for her to be found not criminally responsible. An expert testified that and had spoken to him, and he believed she had schizophrenia. He said that she had seen Marcel as a threat for some reason that night. From what she had told him, Marcel had been sat on the steps outside, possibly even falling asleep or passing out, his back to the door, and who was upstairs in her apartment, got scared that Marcel was going to hurt her. She grabbed the hammer she had just bought, crept out behind him, and beat him to death. He said in her mind she was acting on some sort of preemptive self-defense, but the prosecution were pushing for a first-degree murder conviction. They said the evidence presented showed that she had clearly planned a very deliberate killing. She admitted she had kept hitting Marcel until she was sure he was dead, showing she knew she was going to kill him, but continued her attack. They said he was very drunk and incapacitated, unable to fight her off or even really know what was happening until it was too late. And if it was some sort of self-defense, why hadn't she called for help after the fact and alerted someone? Instead, she hid him away and disposed of the evidence to cover her tracks. She had then continued to lie to the police. In her first interview, the prosecution argued that the preemptive hiding of the murder weapon and cleaning products had to be questioned. Her father, Brian, testified that his daughter's mental health had started to decline and deteriorate after she told her parents she was going to the police about several alleged sexual assaults. Upon hearing this, it was the only time that and showed any reaction in court and burst into tears. Brian said that one night she called him, begging him to come home. When he got there, she was hysterical and all the cupboard doors in the house were open or torn off. She couldn't talk, eventually writing on a piece of paper that she had been molested. She said that she had been assaulted by one of her coaches and this had ended her future sports career. She said she had also been assaulted by her ex-boyfriend, claims he vehemently denied in court. When she reported these incidents to the police, they had big concerns about her mental health and her cases were put on hold. Her father said she had even accused him of assault. She said when she realized it wasn't true, she said it feels so real. Brian said she was convinced her family were trying to poison her and that people were breaking into her room while she slept. She was later diagnosed with bipolar disorder and psychotic symptoms. While in the treatment facility just before she moved into the apartment block, professionals inside said she would go from punching walls and being aggressive to laughing and joking with them. They really didn't know what mood she was going to be in hour to hour. Winston had been in the women's correctional facility in Clarenville awaiting trial. An informant had recorded a lot of their conversations in one and made up a rhyme, singing "Goodnight Marcel" and laughing about it. The prosecution were left disappointed when most of these recordings were actually excluded and not allowed into evidence. The judge said they didn't have any relevance and would have an excessive prejudicial impact on the jury. This was a big blow for the prosecution, as they argued it was completely relevant to the case. After a month-long trial, it was now up to the jury, and people really had no idea as to which way it would go, and Norris was found not criminally responsible. Marcel's brother stormed out of the courtroom as the rest of his family cried. One journalist in the courtroom said the verdict of not criminally responsible was so rare, really did shock people, as so much has to be proven for this to be the case. And alongside her own admissions, it seemed to be quite a strange verdict. Following the verdict, the board had 3 options for those who were found not criminally responsible: an absolute discharge, a conditional discharge, or detention with or without conditions, and was placed in psychiatric care, and it will be down to the Newfoundland and Labrador Criminal Mental Disorder Review Board's discretion as to when she is released. Well, obviously we thought it was the right result. That's what we argued for in the first place. Certainly I wouldn't consider it a victory. Still a not criminally responsible verdict. It's not a win-win, standard, but it's what we hoped for. It's what we thought was the right result. Do you think these were very tough issues for this jury to try and decide? I think they were very tough issues. I think the jury did an amazing job. They were obviously very dedicated. They paid a lot of attention. They asked very smart questions. I think they took their role very seriously, and I think it was difficult for them to make the decision. These are difficult issues with no easy answers, and I think the jury has looked at it and they came up with a not criminally responsible verdict. It has to be asked because there have been a lot of discussions about the law here. What's the likelihood of an appeal? Well, as you know, it's way too early to assess that situation now. We've just got the verdict. We have our 30 days to look at whether an appeal is proper or necessary. We'll review the way the trial unfolded and discuss with myself and co-counsel and with our appeals section, and we'll look at whether or not an appeal is necessary or justified. So that's a decision for another day. Less than 4 months after his testimony against Kevin O'Brien was found dead in St. John's Harbor. Police said they did not suspect any foul play, noting his addiction problems, saying they thought he likely fell in and drowned. The prosecution filed an appeal against the verdict with the Supreme Court of Newfoundland and Labrador, stating that evidence was improperly excluded from the trial. The judging panel found that, whilst it was an error to exclude the evidence, it would have no effect on the jury's decision. They also upheld the decision to disallow the audio recording from inside her cell. It was ruled that there was no basis for a new trial. Still fighting at the end of 2019, the Crown then took their appeal to the highest court in the country, the Supreme Court of Canada. But again, it was dismissed right away, and the Supreme Court gave no reason as to why, and has never said what really transpired between the pair and her defense team say she might not even ever remember. Everybody will always be left guessing. Marcel was laid to rest with his beloved mother, Evelyn, lying side by side. Jacqueline said she always looks at a picture that Marcel gave to her. It is of a bridge over a peaceful lake at sunrise. When he gave it to her, he said, "This should remind you that everything is water under the bridge. Just let things go." Something she tries to live by for his sake and memory, but with the feeling of no justice being served. To let it go is a bitter pill to swallow. Marcel's life had been spiraling and he was struggling to claw things back, but he was trying. His family said Marcel would have given you the shirt off his back and done anything for anyone. He wanted to get better for his family, and it is tragic to think that his life was ended before he even had a chance to make the changes he told people he so desperately wanted to. As the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper, thank you for joining me here at Mr. Nightcared. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep, and until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.